Welcome, everyone, for joining us on International Women's Day and to this session with the Association for Project Management. I'm the president of the APM, also managing director of transportation for Costain and visiting professor at the UCL School of Sustainable Construction. Sorry, that one always sticks. And I hope you'll join us today and ask us some good questions at the end. We're basically looking at the title being Levelling the Playing Field. And what does that mean? We'll be talking about many of the issues affecting women in projects that APM has been highlighting in its recent campaign. I'm joined by a panel of female experts from across the project profession and from many different sectors. They will introduce themselves shortly and give some insights into their own experiences and challenges faced during career progression. And they will also explain what they'd like to bring to this conversation or maybe take away from this conversation as well. And as I said at the beginning, we'd like to hear your thoughts as well. So please post your questions. We'll try and keep our eyes on that. And anything else you'd like to share in the comments section. And then we'll have some time at the end where we'll try and respond to as many of those as we possibly can. So without any more to do, may I first introduce Karina Singh, Director of Function, Profession and Standards at the Infrastructure Projects Authority. Karina, over to you.
Thank you, Sue. And as you said, so I am Karina Singh. I work at the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, which is the centre of expertise for project delivery across government. So there are about 26,000 people across government who are involved in delivering projects, and about 16,000 people who identify as project delivery professionals. And my job is to make sure they've got the skills and capabilities they need to, and the guidance they need to do their job properly. I have been in civil service for over 30 years now and involved in project delivery of one sort or another for nearly 20, and have benefited a lot from civil service policies over time. What which I'm sure we'll come to later, what I'd like to get out of the conversation today is to get a different perspective, is to hear from people about what it feels like on the ground today. I've been through my challenges and opportunities along the way, but I'm keen to hear what others have to say about it as well.
Lovely, Karina. Thank you very much indeed. And next up we have Jo Roberts, Head of Strategy, High Speed Rail Group.
Hi everyone, as Sue just said, Head of Strategy in High Speed Rail Group. I work at the Department for Transport and I've been a civil servant now for about 7 years, previously at the Department for Education, worked in project management for about 18 or so years. That might age me specifically now for people, and worked my way up from being a project management office assistant, kind of getting to grips with reporting, to now Head of Strategy on High Speed 2, which is probably the biggest project going in government at the moment. Karina, yes, it is very much so. So I would like to, share what I've been learning over the past few years, and also, hopefully kind of pick up some tips and help others to level the playing field, so to speak. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jo. It's really good to see people progress. I started off as a site engineer and end up as an MD, but I'm sure we can all share those stories, but it's very heartening to hear it. Thank you. We've now got Jenny McLaughlin, Project Manager, Heathrow.
Hi, yes, so I'm Jenny McLaughlin, a project manager at Heathrow. I've been in the aviation industry for 2 decades now. So again, Jo, that will age me a little bit as well. So I have done a variety of things. I started at Heathrow as an environment manager, and then did a stint in airside operations doing business change, and have been within infrastructure for the last 6 years. I'm also the lead for the Disability Network. I was diagnosed at a young age with dyslexia, and late diagnosed with ADHD, which is some of the barriers that I've experienced through my career is actually linked in with my disability rather than maybe my gender, although the two are very much intertwined. And I think that's what I want to get from this session, is actually to understand there isn't a single issue. We don't live single issue lives. We live very complicated and diverse lives. And we need to understand how each of those aspects of identity feed into the barriers we experience and the barriers I've experienced in my progression. And I think we as project managers absolutely play a key role in ensuring that we open the door for others, and we ensure that there is systematic inclusion in what we deliver to ensure that those who come after us don't have the same barriers that we've experienced.
Fantastic, Jenny. I love the idea of systematic inclusion. That's my takeaway already. Thank you. And we have Jenn Harris, Program Manager Science Capability in Animal Health Program DEFRA.
Thank you, Sue. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenn Harris. I work for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs as a Program Manager. I have a similar background. I've worked in construction for about over 15 years in a variety of roles. I started my career as a site administrator and worked my way up into bids and marketing, and then into project and program management. My background is varied, and I think we'll find many people on this call and on this panel have a varied background, and I think it's really important that we recognize that. I'm heavily involved in the equity, diversity, and inclusion networks within the civil service, and I worked in private and public sector. And what am I looking to get away from this? Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be on this panel with such amazing women, and to know that there are so many others, men and women and non-binary, watching this. But I really reflect on how we make change, and we do that through data and stories. And I think this is a great time to share our stories.
That's lovely, Jen. Thank you very much. So if I kick off, and do feel free to jump in, no specific order, just make this as a conversation, if that's okay. I think, can we describe firstly, if we think diversity, gender diversity in particular, is an issue that needs to be resolved, or is it something we're just making up? And what are the barriers in reality that make it an issue? Who'd like to jump in?
Can I jump in first there, Sue? I recently posted a blog on the APM's website about levelling up the playing field. I really believe that COVID, despite it, many, many terrible things that happened, when we were all forced to work from home, that was a really great leveller. It meant that people were able to continue their caring responsibilities, and it meant that they could also, continue their work, however which way they did that. So I do think that kind of has brought the flexible working revolution, or, being able to work from wherever, I think it's brought things a few years ahead by having COVID. So that's my silver lining of that horrible situation.
Yeah, I think that's so right. The other big thing for me COVID did was it gave us trust in each other and trust in other people, which is fantastic. You can never take that away now. It's super. Any other ideas on barriers to gender diversity?
I'd like to come in on that point. I think in my mind, there is an issue with representation, and the statistics speak for themselves. There's I think about 30% of the project profession is female, but in the industry I work in construction, it's more like 12%, and that 12.5 to be specific, and that percentage hasn't changed in decades. So since the 90s, which is I've done research on this, and that was when my research started looking at the 90s. So in these past kind of 3 decades, nothing's really changed. It's fluctuated between 9 and 13% in that time. So for me, one of my biggest barriers, I think, looking back to when I first started my career, is around representation, and not seeing senior leaders that not only looked like me but acted like me, that were different, that had a different leadership style. And I've overcome that, really, and I overcame that early in my career by finding a network of like-minded women and other allies around me to support me, and those networks have kept a constant. They've kept a huge support throughout my career, and that encouragement.
That's really super interesting. I mean, I feel quite blessed working for Costain. We've got more women on the executive board than we have men, and our chair of the main board is a woman as well. So it's like, and there's good representation on that as well. So it really does make people think differently. And I've had a lot of people sort of ringing me up and say, can I come and join Costain? And I say, yeah, well, what's made you do that? And it is just looking at the website. It's that power of image, isn't it?
Yeah,
and then you
people
get
want
the
to
power
see.
of diversity. They want to see.
Yeah.
They want to see the difference. Yeah, that's really interesting. The other thing I thought was interesting was the stats on the engineering sector is the most likely sector to say it values gender diversity. And I thought that is the reason for that is there isn't enough engineers. We need 80,000 more engineers a year than we produce. So supply and demand, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think building on that, Sue, I was at the Royal Academy of Engineers EDI report last week, and one of the really interesting things to come out of that and the discussions that we're having is that getting people into the industry is one thing, keeping them there is something different. And that's something that very much came out of the themes of their report. And in terms of gender, the statistics show that there is a difference. Understanding where that difference is coming from is a different conversation, and that's what they're finding from the report findings. Actually going down to the root cause is really hard. Yeah. But one of the things that I've definitely found from the work that I've been looking at in terms of becoming more systematically inclusive in our designs, when you take something like the CDM 2015 regulations, so the construction design management regulations, at the moment they require us to ensure that we've designed so that it is safe to be built, safe to be maintained, and safe to be operated. And yet no point at the moment do we actually look into the detail of who is it we're keeping safe. Is it every demographic that we're keeping safe, or is there a mythical average in our minds when we're, as a client, as a designer, as a constructor, actually looking at who we're keeping safe? And the example I've given before is actually when I was a project manager on a site and was doing the safe society visit, I was asked to walk across some rebar, which I did. And in my stomach, I knew I was unsafe as I was doing it. I could feel it, but I did it because I didn't want to seem like I was incapable of doing my job. I didn't want to put my hand up and say, I feel unsafe. Even me, very vocal person, I didn't do that. And what it left me to feel is that actually how many other people on site aren't sticking their hand up, full fear of stigma, that they don't want to be classed as other, that they don't want to be seen as unable. And therefore, we aren't designing for everybody. And that's where this retention piece comes in, because if you fundamentally don't have that psychological or physical safety, you're not going to stay within the industry. And until we absolutely recognise the elephant in the room, that we need to really start to be curious of the standards that we create, the way that we deliver it, the understanding from an infrastructure, technology, process point of view. Have we considered inclusive design, human diversity within these, and really start to get to the point of the root causes of some of these things, so we can understand where it is that we're failing and therefore improve it. And by improving it, we're not just going to improve it for the minority, we're going to improve it for everybody. Because as we know, the statistics of suicide within the construction industry are significantly high for men. And I truly believe that's because some of these issues that we may be the canary for, we may be the ones that are highlighting it, but it's affecting people that are existing within the businesses.
And those suicides are worse for males.
Yeah.
The male suicide rate is off the record at the moment. And I think that's something, when we talk about gender, I often think about gender in the other way as well. You know, as we are evolving and becoming more close to parity, that's having an impact on the men and the other sort of gender basis, because their world has been picked apart. At one point, you had privilege and you just used it, but now it's going.
And it's two sides of the coin. I think we, if we look at society and what society tells women are acceptable roles for women, what is society telling are acceptable roles for men, and what role do they have to play? And there's a huge amount of stress and pressure to be the breadwinner and to carry such an incredible load. And so the masculinities, particularly in really male-dominated fields, is really something that needs to be kind of looked at as well under the lens. So it's the same coin, it's two different sides.
Indeed, it's not about one gender winning, it is about both rebalancing, and that's really, really important, isn't it? That you make that point really, really well, Jen, is that we need to think about a different way of the leadership model needs to be different. We've got a very, very, very old-fashioned patriarchal way of looking at leadership. It's the presenteeism, it's the 5-day week, it's the long hour working culture, it's having the technical knowledge and being the the hero leader in the room. And we know that's not what gets projects delivered. What gets projects delivered is that person who can create the psychological safety so that people feel empowered to speak up, people feel empowered to say that they're not feeling safe, that they are thinking about things from a different point of view. And a lot of those leadership characteristics are things that can absolutely be learnt and then displayed by either gender. So for me, this isn't just it's not a binary conversation about bringing women to display the same characteristics as men have displayed in the past. It's about changing the leadership conversation. So we are very aware of this in the civil service. So we've put a lot of effort in the civil service to try to change what we mean by leadership. So across the civil service, we have, as I've said in my blog on the APM website, we do lots of name blind recruitment, which really I think has helped. And we have been very particular about focusing on all our feeder grades so that everybody feels confident to be applying for senior roles. And we do a lot of mentoring and sponsorship as well of people to make sure that we've got true diversity coming through. And we've made really good progress, and we're nearly at 50-50 in the senior civil service now. Not so great in project delivery because we still have quite a lot. We still pay a lot of regard to that subject matter expertise and that technical expertise. But that's changing, of course, because a lot of things that we deliver now, yes, infrastructure is very important, and you do need an engineering background. But there is so much that we're doing in the digital space, in the infrastructure, in social infrastructure space, that actually, you don't have to have a particular background to come through. So it's something that we are very conscious of. We have created a role models campaign to just to amplify some of those people who are bucking the trend and show that you can do jobs working part-time, you can do jobs when you're job sharing. You don't need to be that subject matter technical expert to lead a big project, a complex project, because leading a project in itself is a hugely technical and complex thing. Actually, you can buy in the engineering expertise or the infrastructure expertise and somebody who can work alongside you to help with that. So we're very keen to explore different types of leadership and role model different types of leadership across the piece. So that's what we're building in the civil service.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. Sorry, Sue, in the fact that as someone kind of in the middle grades of civil service, I think it's really wonderful to see job share or role shares. We have lots of, at DFT, we have lots of director role shares where we have two people kind of doing the same job, 5 days a week, 4 days a week. And I think that's a really, really inspiring thing. Not only that directorship role is so huge that it needs two people, but that it can be done. So for me, that's a really, really big thing. And Karina, I think we were talking the other day, and we said that there are a role share of permanent secretaries at DCMS now as well. So that's just the top, really, and that's absolutely a great example for everyone.
Isn't it great? You get double the amount of talent, in one role, and it's I've done job shares as well. In my time, I've worked for 30 odd years. I've worked half of that time. I've worked part-time hours, and part of that I've worked as a job share. And it's great because you can test your thinking. You've got a safe space and a colleague to work with, and you can double your capacity, and you learn so much because you're working with somebody with a different perspective on life. So it's really great. It's really great.
No, that's fantastic, and that sort of coaching leadership to me lent itself really well, and perhaps more naturally to women. So it's to me it's just great. I never thought it'd happen in my lifetime when we got here, so that's excellent. So we talked about some of the barriers then to gender diversity. Let's just think about in your lives what's changed since you started working to now, and what impact has that had on you?
So I have been absolutely outstanded by the level and the difference of organisations that are coming together to work hand in hand collaboratively to improve. So if you look at the memorandum of understanding between REBA and RICS and the other organisation, CIOB, to really look at how do we work together at improving this. This is not about one organisation, it's not about one group. It's actually, we are only going to shift the dial in diversity if we all move and we all talk to the same narrative. And that change of being curious, really being curious about what it is, what the root causes for us all to be able to do it, and what sits in each sphere, and work together on this is a massive change, I think, out there. And one of the great things that's coming out shortly is the REBA accessibility overlay. So shortly we'll be starting to show how we can build it into what we're doing. And as other industries pick this up and start to work with it, we will build in that accessibility that will help all people to be able to do and be in project management, no matter which expertise and field they need to be in. And that, for me, that curiosity and that drive is the real change I've seen in recent years.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jenny. Jenn, how about you? What have you seen during your career that's really made an impact on you in terms of change?
I think there's a number, and Joe, you mentioned it earlier. I think one of the biggest one is this real emphasis on flexibility and flexible working. And I think it's really important that this is a turning point now. Do we, collective we, go back to this bums on seats, very draconian, traditional form of command and control leadership? Or do we continue to say, actually, we can trust our employees to do work by themselves for a good part of their time, and they can crack on with it like adults? So I think it's a really important thing that we continue to push, and we can never take it for granted. You just can't. And flexibility has been a really important part. But also for me, I'm reflecting back on conversations I had with directors 10 years ago, asking about, women directors, what they're doing about EDI in the space, and it was very, very blinkered conversations. And I think for me, the biggest part is having this conversation. It's got to start somewhere. We're all going to make mistakes in the work that we do, but starting somewhere with being curious, like Jenny said, being curious, asking the questions, and recognizing that a lot of the barriers, we're more alike than we're different. And a lot of the barriers that are around us.
Nice cat.
Hello, cat. Society and the society that we all embrace and we're all part of it have constructed a lot of them around us. So I think we need to engage with each other as people, as humans.
Yeah, and I think Jenny's point about inclusivity is that we don't all work the same way. Some people are early morning people, some are late, owls of the night. Some people like doing little bits and then doing other things in between. And it's only just recently that scientists have proven, for example, that teenagers' brains, because they're growing, really don't like mornings. So they're not just saying it; they really don't like mornings because they can't actually function in the morning. So we keep on learning more, don't we?
Absolutely. And who's set the time that we need to all be in the office between 9 and 5 and any of these strict hours. And I think it is important that we continue to have the conversations, because we all spend a huge amount of time at work, and we want to have a great a good time doing it, and we really need to embrace the differences and the similarities around us.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Sue, the one thing I think, with the benefit of a longer career than most people on this panel can say, is that I think I've seen the tone of the conversation move away from let's fix the woman to let's fix the system.
Yeah.
So it's much more a conversation about actually what are the barriers to everybody being successful, rather than let's try to work with the women to give them whatever they need, whatever they were lacking to fit into this narrow view of leadership and this narrow view of success. For me, I think we've broadened that definition of success, which I think is great, and we are really broadening and still experimenting to a certain degree with what we mean by leadership and what good leadership looks like. And it is not being that 9 to 5 command and control person who's got all the answers. It's about somebody who can bring teams together, who can bring different perspectives together, and curate great conversations between people and problem solving. So that for me, that's been, I think, a huge step forward. I'm really pleased about that. And what I've been really pleased about is, and we are seeing this quite a lot in civil service at the moment, when we talk about role shares and job shares, it's not just women doing it, it's men doing it as well. And we've got people who are choosing to step away and saying, I do want to spend more time with my family when I've got young kids, or actually I want to take some time out to look after my elderly parents, or I just, we've got somebody who's taking some time out because he wants to complete his PhD while also doing his work. So he's job sharing with somebody else. So he's investing in himself whilst also being a committed leader. And so I think we should embrace that, because what we are losing out if we say to people, we don't want you to work shorter weeks or part-time hours or flexible hours, because all that skill and knowledge that we've spent decades, years building, we just lose it all. So I think the conversation has significantly shifted over my 10, 20, 30 years in this space.
I think I'm so glad you said that, because the other thing that struck me was, the 30% club and the recent drive to get more women on boards. That started off, as you said, let's try and fix the women, and they use this horrible term that you're not board ready. It sounded like you're not oven ready, like a chicken or something. And I thought about this, and I thought, this is mad, because most of the men who go onto board for the first time aren't board ready either, but no one's mentioning them.
Yes.
It's bizarre, isn't it? But no, we've moved on. That's a really good point. I think we are in a better place. So any other thoughts about things that have changed that we should celebrate today?
I think I'll just pick up on a little bit of what Karina was just saying there about working part-time. And I did go part-time for a period after having my son. And it was, you only work part-time. I was like, well, no, I do paid work part-time, and I'm working a lot the rest of the time, but just not all for you. So I do think that there's a bit of a shift around that. And the association of working part-time, it isn't a barrier. You are still very active, whatever you're doing, and you're just devoting that 50, 60, 80% of your thinking time to work, and the rest of it you're doing other things. I think it's really refreshing actually to see, as we were just saying, more men kind of doing the job and role shares. Recently my line manager took shared parental leave and was really happy to take 6 weeks, and that was just really fantastic for him to role model to the rest of the division, because I think that's quite a new thing for people to, I mean, it's been going for about 5 or 6 years, but I think it's still really good for people to role model that, and it isn't just women. So I
think that's a really good point. We've got lots of people who joined us on LinkedIn. This is rather exciting. If you have the chance to look in the chat, we've got people from Essex, Nigeria, Denmark, Toronto, Argentina, Leeds. Fantastic. So if I can we're coming up to the half hour almost, just pick some of the questions up from the chat, if that's okay. There was one interesting one about actually lots of women in project management offices didn't actually go in at the project management level. They might have gone in as project coordinators or sometimes PAs. I was just wondering what you think, and this was another question as well, how do we move that dial of diversity within our actual project management profession? So Jenny, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, and I think some of it comes down to understanding what do we mean by skills. And quite often when I'm asked what the skills gap is, it's not a skills gap, there's a people gap. And actually when we understand the humans that we already have and already within and around, or can transfer in from other industries into our professions, then we understand, well, what skills do they currently have, and where do we change that? Because actually a lot of the time they have the skills, they're transferable. We just don't understand how to talk about that, how to verbalize that, how to make that understandable. So they go, actually, I fit 60% of that, and the other 40% you can train me on. So I absolutely fit in this space. And when we get better at doing that, understanding what are the skills we're actually looking for, as Karina has said, you know, there's some stuff around this which is about understanding. It don't need to be technically understood. I don't have an engineering background, but absolutely I understand more about concrete now than I ever did 2 years ago, because that's the projects I've been on. And when I go and do a project within the terminal, I'll understand more about those, because I can learn and understand, and I have the expertise within my team. My job is to facilitate that safe space for them to work. And when we understand that actually we have people in our industry who are, you know, in other areas who would like to step into project management, and they absolutely just need that wraparound care, they need that buddy system, they need that support to understand what are the different things they may not have understood yet but can learn, then I think you'll get that diversity increase.
I think that's a really, really good point, because what I'm finding at the moment is I recruit on attitude more than anything else. If someone's willing to give it a go, I'm willing to give them a go. And I think if more of us do that, we can bring in people from a lot of the professions that have gone down. And you know, it's so important. I think you give people a chance, especially in this day and age.
Indeed. I've always thought that you can teach people skills, but you can't teach attitude. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what I really like about the project delivery profession, to go to Denise's question, is you can come into project delivery from any other profession and at any point in your career. So just taking me as an example, I did lots of policy, corporate services work, operations work, and sort of fell into project management, and actually over a course of time realized what I was doing was project management, and then decided to specialize in it. And I think there are lots of people who do that. And, you know, so you could come into project management in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, because a lot of the skills that we've got can be developed in other professions and are very, very transferable. So I think that is what our strategy is in government, is trying to catch people at different stages in their career and then entice them to come in and stay within project delivery, because what we do is really, really interesting, and we are literally building the future. Things that we are building today are going to be used in 15, 20, 50, 100 years time. And so it's so exciting to be able to point to something to say, yes, I was involved in doing that. And I think our transferable skill is our superpower, to bring together different people, different skill sets, different functions, different ways of thinking, diversity, and actually put all of that talent, all of that energy, all of that different ways of thinking into solving a problem, because that's what we do. Our superpower is solving problems and bringing people together, and that is absolutely a skill that we can all use from different professions and come in at any point. So for me, that's how we build that diversity.
I think that's such a strong point, because I think project management is one of the professions that's sector agnostic. And in fact, the less you know about the sector, in a way, it's better, because you can ask all the dumb questions.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. No, I think that's fascinating. And also, what I really like at the moment, Alex Chisholm's leading this campaign to get secondees going from Whitehall to the private sector and back again. So we've had a DG with us for over a year now, and we've learned so much from him, and he's learned so much from us. You can just see the value on it. So why wouldn't anyone do a year out somewhere? And, you know, for people who've been in the private sector, you know, go into government, learn how policies are made, learn the politics of serving the ministers, all of that type of thing. I think, you know, that more of the crossing the boundaries would be really good for everyone. And I think the APM umbrella allows them to do that as well. And I know there's a big push to get chartered project professionals in government, which is super.
Yes, indeed.
Cool. So we've got one question here, which is really interesting as well, about psychological safety, from Manuela, saying, should we increase the use of behavioural science and project management to help overcome biases? Now, I just find that really fascinating, because I think a lot of how we behave is kind of drilled into us when we're very, very young, and our expectation. I used to look at, there'd be a man and a woman both in suits, and I'd always assume the man was the boss, just because that's where I was brought up. So I just wonder if we could tap into the way we think, and maybe some of our pinpointed thinking, into using behavioural science. I find it an absolutely fascinating subject. I just wonder if anyone in the group has got any views on that.
Jenny, and you've done some research on this, haven't you?
Yeah, so having ADHD and dyslexia, I've had to come to terms with the fact that my brain is wired differently, and how I interact and process the world is very different from how other people interact and process the world. And for a very, very long time, I believed that it was a fault in myself. And I believe the labels that were given to me, that I was lazy, or I was too talkative, or too sensitive, or all of these things that kind of comes with the wraparound of ADHD, particularly in women. What I've learned now is actually that is my ability to humanize. So I'm very aware of what I need in psychological safety in order to be vulnerable with my team. And therefore, in what I get back from that is they are vulnerable back with me. So they will often tell me what's happening in a situation way before they probably would have, maybe to somebody else, because I will say, I'll put my hand up and go, that didn't go well, did it? I made a mistake there. Or I think this is happening. What do you think? Or I'm really interested to hear your side of the story. Please tell me, because I need to understand from your perspective where we're at. And I think that understanding of language, the nuances of that distribution of power, so that there's more equality within the setting, is so important for building that psychological safety. It is about understanding that what I say to my team is the team makes a mistake. The team has to overcome it. The team is moving forward. The team is successful. This is not about individuals. This is about all of us coming together and being the eyes and ears for everybody else, and absolutely watching out and being there in that moment to understand, okay, this didn't go well, but this is where we're pivoting to, and being there as a team to make sure that's delivered. And that what you get back from that is just immense. And I love my teams to bits. I always praise them. I love them to bits. And there is nothing they would do or can't do with that psychological safety.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, really powerful. I think the ability we have now to speak our minds freely, and to have people accepting of the fact that there are differences and respect those differences. When you think of just even 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. You had to conform, and if you think about it too, you had to actually dress in a certain way to go to certain things. We're much freer now. It's a much better place indeed.
Indeed, the number of times, I still hate this word when people say she doesn't have, it's normally a she doesn't have the right sort of gravitas to be a leader, or being called aside to be told how to dress. It's really annoying, but it still happens. It still happens. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the fact that we all laughed at that, Karina, because I think we all recognise it. Absolutely.
I think, Jenny, on your point, first of all, I'm with you, Sue, as well. Sue and Jenny, it's the behavioural science part of the way teams behave, the way organisations behave, absolutely fascinates me. So I did research a number of years back on self-perception, because I was really interested in this idea of, do men and women, those are the two genders I looked at, do they think differently about themselves? How do they is there self-reflection? Is there something we can glean from this when we look at barriers to women's progression, and primarily around the leaky pipeline? So lots of women entering construction and male-dominated industries, and leaking out throughout their careers. So looking at the self-perception survey, I found, and it was quite surprising to me, and it was statistically significant, that this measure called global self-worth, which was how you feel about yourself compared to others, just decreased significantly in women from a young age to as they got older, whereas for men it dipped down slightly, but then it actually went up to the highest point. I think the age group was 55 to 65 plus, and they had the highest scores. But for women, it just bottomed out, and I feel like that point, and alongside some other domains that we looked at, that I looked at. There was a zigzag career pattern and a zigzag self-perception pattern that quite closely matches the zigzag career pattern that's been researched when it comes to women's career paths. So I feel that, you know, this psychological safety and behavioral science and all these things, we really do need to tap into that a little bit further, because this, as you've mentioned, this kind of one size fits all model just doesn't work, and we can't continue to kind of treat it as something that's working.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I was so pleased to see the resurgence of Project 13 recently on the guidance for governance of infrastructure project delivery. It is all about collaboration. It's all about the really intelligent clients. It's all about, you know, using data. It's all about delivering projects in a real modern world and not delivering them like a business, you know, having huge boards and subcommittees and all that sort of thing. So that was really, really heartwarming. And I think if we take that behavioural part into things like procurement, so for example, I've 2 major procurements recently that were not looking actually at what you had submitted in terms of the tender, but looking at you as the people who are going to deliver the project. So one of them for the PQQ was 1 hour's interview at 24 hours notice, which was phenomenal. It's such good fun to do it, but phenomenal because you just got straight to the point. Basically, can I work with this person? Do they know what they're talking about? You know, it was such a good way of doing it. The second one was about 17 collaborative working sessions with the client and with your competitors to work through for the client what the scope and budget and risk aspect of that project would be, so that when they got to the end of those 17 sessions, they had the best person on the job to actually help them deliver it, and they tested it on the way. And that was really tough though, because when you're in an environment where you're being observed and you're with your competitors and the client, it's very hard to do any fake behavior stuff, because the only thing you can do is what you are and be authentic. And I thought those 2 examples of taking behavioral science and putting it to real solid proper use to help the client get what they need and what they can afford is really powerful for me. So I think the more we can actually celebrate that behavioral science and the thinking behind it, Jen, I think there's a couple of books out on it. I wish I'd read them when I had my kids and I was bringing my kids up now. I would have been a much better parent, but it is so simple but so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love that you pointed out the tendering process, because I think, you know, as somebody who now sits in a client side role, it's imperative that we as the client ask the right questions, and that we really delve down into what we really want. You know, what do we want to see in major projects and programs? What kind of behaviors do we value? You know, when you talk about social value, you know, we've got public procurement notice that asks that the social value model is being presented to us, but are we really asking the right question? Are we delving down to actually what do we want to see? What should this look like? It's not, we don't just want a tick box, and it's really important that clients, people in a client side role, really use that initiative.
Yeah, I think the other bonus is it saves a lot of time on both sides, and it saves a lot of money, and that neither of those are bad things, are they?
Indeed.
So we any more thoughts on behavioural science with project management, or any sort of learnings of recent that we can share?
So I think there is something that we ponder about quite a lot in government is about the theory of incomplete leader. So basically everybody recognising that they cannot be perfect. And I think that is quite difficult for us as women in particular, when we have been brought up in a world where we are supposed to be all things to all people. I was about to say all things to all men, but no, actually it's all things to all people. Where we are quite often people pleasers, and we try to be good at absolutely everything. And we teach in our leadership programs, we teach the theory of incomplete leadership, that is absolutely fine not to be good at everything. And it was a complete game changer for me personally. It really, really opened up my eyes to, actually, I can take risks. I know I'm good at some things, but actually I don't need to spend my entire life trying to be, good at the things that I know. I'll never be an engineer. You know, I just don't have that sort of thinking or that sort of expertise. So actually that's absolutely fine. So let me make sure that in my team then I have got the best engineer who I can then talk to and understand, and they can understand me, and then together we can solve great things. So it allowed me to be kinder to myself. That whole theory of that incomplete leader allowed me to be kinder to myself, but also allowed me to expect more from my team, because we can be innovative together and we can be more creative together. So I think, and that then also made me more deliberate about how I create that culture and that psychological safety within the team to say, yes, we can experiment. It's fine to make a mistake. And my motto is make a new mistake every day. It has to be a new mistake, because if it's the same mistake, you haven't learned from yesterday. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing the boundaries and you're not thinking outside the box. So make a new mistake every day, and be kind to yourself. Not everything is going to work. So I think that psychological safety and that behavioural science is something that we certainly have trying to embed into our teaching for our major program leaders within government.
And that's very much, I think, if you look at the entrepreneurs, fail fast, but fail safe, and then move on to the next one.
Indeed.
Yeah, really good advice. So we've got a question here from Gaynor Lewis. It says that women tend to be less confident about their own value or contribution than men. Do you think that's a generalism that's true? That's what you're going to say. It depends who the person is, but
it depends who the person is. But I'd say, well, I don't know, because I've never been in a man's body, so I don't know how I would feel if I was a man. But I do know from my own experience that I was incredibly unconfident, and I always would worry like mad about anything that people said to me or things I had done incorrectly, and I really, really did not trust my own abilities. And and some of it was driven by my own sense of lack of confidence, but some of it was perceptions that were placed on me, because people did think that because I was a woman, because I was a woman of colour, because I hadn't been to certain schools or certain universities, or didn't have a certain degree, or had caring responsibilities, that I would not be capable of doing certain jobs. And that was, so some of that perception was coming from me internally, and some of it was coming externally. So the thing that I did to try to address that is that know what you want to be good at, and then make sure you are jolly good at that. So I knew that technically I did not feel confident in my own abilities as a program manager. So I made sure I then invested in myself and got the CPD I needed and the technical qualifications I needed to be able to say, I know about this because I have got these qualifications. So some of it is about that. Some of it is actually about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. So if you were thinking, oh, I can't do this job, I'm not sure I can do this job, or they must have somebody else in line for that job, you just go for it. Yeah. If you don't make the grade, you don't make the grade. That's fine. But at least you've tested yourself against a field, but also you're sending a message. And I think that's really, really important when you're working in an organization. And I did it by accident the first time I did it, but then I realized actually it didn't. So when I came back from maternity leave for the first time, I applied for promotion, and then somebody sort of caught me in the corridor saying, oh, I didn't realize you were still committed. And I thought, oh my God, okay, right, I really need to be doing that. So I did that the second time I came back from maternity leave. Right, I'm still committed, and I still want to have a career despite having kids. So it is important to be thoughtful about how people are perceiving you, and trying to break some of those perceptions in a constructive way.
Yeah, Karina, I'd absolutely build on that. And I think there are studies that show that within society, when we bring up boys, we bring them up to take risks. And when we bring up girls, we don't do the same. Now, part of that is because the world isn't designed as safe for women as it is for men. When we look at the statistics in terms of designing for women, Arup are looking at designing safe cities to be safer for women, and we're not supposed to go out after dark because we know we might be at risk, and all of those kind of things. There is an element of actually switching that narrative, as you said, and actually saying, well, actually, no, I'm not comfortable with that. I do want to take risks, and it's absolutely okay for me to take risks. And I am in a position now as a project manager to start looking at, how do I design the world to be safer for me? How do I design a world that actually does look for all of humanity's needs, be it whatever gender or race or LGBTQ plus or whatever the disability or anything else is. And that's what I love about APM, is that actually that's what we are here to do, is to look at and ask those curious questions, so that actually we can be that foundation for the next woman who wants to come in and say, actually, I want to take a risk. I want to look at whether I can make a mistake, and by making those mistakes at some point be a success.
Yeah, that's really well put, Jenny. I think the other thing to me is confidence is a massive barrier in itself. You know, if you think you're going to mess something up, 9 times out of 10 you will mess that thing up, because you know it's almost like self-fulfilling prophecies, isn't it? Whereas if you no, I'm really going to nail it, almost like athletes do when they do training, you will probably nail it. It's kind of a psychological thing. But if you are underconfident and put under stress, you can just see people going through horrible things. So I think anything we can do to make women in this profession more confident, let's do it. Let's all take away an action to step in and a bit of allyship and help people when we see they're struggling. I think that'd be really
absolutely.
Cool.
And absolutely, Sue, I completely agree. And I think, you know, I came back from maternity leave. I didn't apply for promotion, Karina. I was just trying to keep going, and I struggled. And so now I always look out for people that are about to go on maternity leave, and, you know, make sure that they've got keeping in touch, even if I'm not their line manager, just to make sure that, you know, they have a kind of voice in the department or in the civil service, because I don't want anyone to go through the kind of blind panic and low self-confidence that I did, because they just didn't know where their place was when they came back from maternity leave, because they were still had their head in baby stuff or childcare and so on. So yeah, I think that there is something about that, isn't it, about taking that away and helping others. It's definitely one of my really big things.
I think that's super idea, John. I remember Rick's, when Amanda was president, she started an initiative on returnees, because they realised they had all of this database of members that had defaulted on their membership, because obviously people didn't want to pay it when they were on maternity leave and stuff. So they phoned them all up and said, you know, we'll forgive you for not paying the subs, come back in and get back into your industry. You know, even use the Rick's HQ as somewhere to have coffee and meet other people type thing. And it was really powerful just by one simple thing of an institution like Rick's actually reaching out to its female members and getting those. You know, we all say, you know, what's happened to all the women in the middle? Where have they gone? They're still here. They're just in a different place. And we need, I think, to reach out and bring them in, definitely.
Yeah. Indeed. No, Jo, you reminded me actually. So when I came back from maternity leave the second time around, I was really struggling, and because I had a baby who just did not sleep through the night at all for 7 years. It was, but I didn't. I was so tired. I couldn't tell I was struggling. I was just blindly just meandering through. But they spotted it, and all they would do is take me out for a coffee once a week, and just not try to teach me anything, just create a safe space for me to talk. And I still, my mental health is still absolutely down to them, and they were so kind. I didn't ask, but they offered, and they helped me through that phase.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. So we're coming to the end of this fascinating conversation, but I just wonder, before we close, what would be the one action you would each take away from this when you go back, or tomorrow back to work? What's the one action you would take that you think could make a real difference?
I'll go first. I think, well, for me, it is about continuing the conversation. And I mean, this has been an absolutely fantastic chat. I hope everyone that's dialed in to LinkedIn has enjoyed it as much as I have on this panel. But it's really, for me, it's about continuing the conversation. And I say, you know, cultural change is individual action on a mass scale. So, you know, we all need to really find our part and our piece in that puzzle, and in change and bringing in a more inclusive environment, world, and society. So I'm going to continue to have the conversation and fight the fight.
Oh, thank you, Jenna. And looking at our international attendees, we've got Pakistan and Wales on now. It's just like, it's amazing, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing.
Power of the internet.
I
think I'll take away something that I do anyway, I think, is to continue to lift as I climb, helping others. I'm not going to pull that ladder up behind me, even if it isn't a career ladder anymore and it's a wonky path. It really is about helping others as I continue my own career. So, yeah.
So
Karina,
if I
how
could
about
come
you?
into two things. So on a personal level, I'd say look out and be that ally for others. So just look around you in your organisation or outside your organisation, and just whatever stage you're at, wherever you are in your career, however you're feeling, there will always be somebody you can help. And so just reach out on a personal level to one person. Yeah. But the other thing I'd say is, going back to my previous point, we are building the future. So all the design decisions we are taking today will be used in 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years' time. So just think about, try to put yourself in the shoes of that person you're designing for in 150, 20 years' time, and try to design for them so that whatever future we leave for them is better than we are now.
Excellent one, Karina. And how about you, Jenny?
So I'm going to continue to be curious and continue to challenge the status quo. I very much wed myself to the systematic inclusion. I think as a client, it is absolutely key that I ensure that all of our systems, no matter what, if we say keeping everyone safe, we mean everyone. If we're saying working together, we mean everyone. That's too difficult. It has to be everyone. And there are some things where we are blinkered, we are unconsciously discriminating, not through any intent, but actually just because we haven't been curious to say, are we sure? Have we checked? Do we understand what the demographics is that we want to be able to maintain, operate, build, use our facilities? And if we can't answer that question, it means we don't know. And if we don't know, we need to challenge ourselves to get curious and understand.
I think that's fantastic. I'm definitely going to take that one away, isn't it? I think in terms of actions, someone on here has put in, be an APM mentor. I think that's a super idea. Please do that. And if you want to be a sort of coach as well for any of the APM project management qualifications, please encourage people. I think women, I think I've noticed that a lot of PAs become really good project managers. So I would encourage that in terms of offering different career opportunities and just open people's eyes, because I think, Karina, as you said, anyone can be a good project manager at any time in their lives. And, we're all project managers in our individual lives. We organise our house, our holidays, our bank account, all of that stuff. So everyone can do it, really, but it's to celebrate it and bring in that diversity of thought, I think. And I'd just like to share with you a few of the big nuggets that you gave me today, because I think they're just super. One is the power of diversity and the systemic inclusion, Jenny, which came from you. And they're not being one single issue, but it's a system. Karina, your point was, we're not fixing women, we're fixing a system. It's in that system that we work, and that systems thinking is super important. And I think the not the skills gap, but the people gap is absolutely spot on for the crazy world we live in now. It is definitely the people gap. So let's invite people into the profession. Let's celebrate that diversity, and let's really celebrate APM, and particularly women in APM. And we will level that playing field. In fact, the machines are on top of it now, leveling it out, and we will make a difference. And we'll do that with a real feeling of psychological safety, really recognizing how important behavioral management is and how it can change things. And also this new concept of coaching leadership, that incomplete leader that's a normal, authentic person, but can lead and lead by example and bring up those that follow. Joe, to your point, always look behind us or next to ourselves and bring people in and take them along on our journeys. It's been absolutely fascinating to share this afternoon with you, and I think to celebrate what COVID has done for us in the positive. It's a huge thing, isn't it? Because our worlds now are much more built around us than us trying to impact the world. And I think that's so important for us going forward. So a huge thank you from me and a huge thank you from APM. It's been really brilliant, and I'm so pleased to have met you, and I hope to hook up with you and reach out to you shortly and share some more thoughts. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.